there any statists in this forest? We're going to find you. So, my name is Derrick Broze, and that was John Vibes. Give it up one more time for John Vibes. Yep, we are writing partners, I guess you could say, and we wrote this book together. And we're actually, since we've released this book back in April, we realized that we're going to be writing a trilogy of books, because this is just one in the beginning of more research that we need to do, more philosophy that we're trying to take apart and put together and see what we can come up with. So what I'm going to talk about is going to be all over the place, but it's going to cover the context of what we cover in this book, and I'm going to tell you about this book through telling you a bit about me and how I got here. And essentially, if I could sum up our entire book here, which features essays from both of us on everything from psychedelics, meditation, the history of anarchy, how to keep children from having to unlearn everything they've been taught, to feminism and gender roles and plant consciousness and animal consciousness and the history of anarchy and Christianity and Islam and a whole range of topics that we really hope you guys will check this out. You can also download it for free online, and I've got copies over there. But within the range of that, essentially what we're trying to say is that if we want to create a free world and create a stateless society and create, I'm not going to assume that everybody here is an anarchist, but I am an anarchist and John's an anarchist, and we're working towards creating a world that exists without some centralized authority telling us what to do, and show people that we really can create a better place without having to have mom and dad authority figure over the top of us. Does anybody else believe in that, think that we could do that? Does that sound like a good idea to anybody else? Because that's what we're trying to work towards. And in our research, looking at the economics, looking at the political history, trying to see if people like Ron Paul can get in office, or anybody else that you might have put your faith and your hope in, we've come to the conclusion that politics is not going to change the world in the way that we want it. And we also have come to the conclusion that violence isn't going to change the world in the way that we want it. And we've come to understand the importance of the non-aggression principle in our lives. So as we're doing this research and we're trying to figure out, how we can learn from past thinkers and philosophers and try to figure out how to put these ideas in our community and spread them through the internet, we both seem to have, through our own paths, come to the conclusion that it's not just the physical fight for freedom, for anarchy that's being waged every day. There's also a much deeper level, what we call spiritual. And another thing about the book, you'll hear these terms tossed around. In the book, we define what we mean when we say freedom, when we say anarchy, when we say consciousness, when we say spirituality. When we say these terms, those are all defined in the book for you to kind of take your own meaning and see what we're talking about. But what we realize is the world is basically out of balance. It's in disharmony, and we work against ourselves in so many ways. So on the anarchist political side of things, we came to the conclusion that electoral politics isn't going to work, violence isn't going to work, and we discovered the philosophy of Agorism, however you want to pronounce it, by Samuel Konkin. New Libertarian Manifesto. Everybody read the New Libertarian Manifesto. And this basically involves using black and gray markets, the counter economy, building counter institutions outside the state. So instead of trying to work with them, we support people like here at Jackalope. This is the counter economy right here. Everybody out here who's doing business without a license right now, congratulations, you are an agorist right now. And this is how we beat the state. And so we've come to those solutions, but we also still see problems in the world. And we came to the conclusion that even if we were to somehow restrict the state and remove the state and break it down and over generations create an anarchist society, if we don't work on our own individual pain, our own individual trauma that has come either from the government, from parents, from our environment, wherever it may come from that you pick up on your journey in life, if we don't work on those things, we're just going to create a world with a bunch of egotistical anarchists running around thinking they know everything. And I don't know if that's going to be much better for us in the end. So we've come to the conclusion that the revolution without healing is a recipe for disaster. And this is, of course, just like coming to the conclusion that anarchy makes sense, coming to your own individual, personal conclusions about how to interact in the world with other free humans. This decision is a very personal one. It's not going to look like what mine does or what John's does. And that's why within the book we present a range of ideas, and definitely we have much respect for indigenous teachings and native teachings, which were, for the most part, much more in harmony with the planet, and we feel have a lot to teach us. So now, like I said, I want to relate my personal story to how that led to this book. So in understanding that it's going to take healing before we can get to a place where we're actually able, because right now, if you've ever discussed anarchy with anybody, you've come to people who say, this can't happen, you're working against human nature, we're all horrible, as soon as the cops are gone or the government's gone, we're just going to start murdering each other. And I think that they're exaggerating their point, and that's, that we can debunk that, but they have a point that there is still a lot of pain, there's a lot of hurt people. I The beginning of my story starts in 2005. 10 years ago, I was a crystal meth addict. I'm 10 years free now this summer. So that led me to getting locked up in a cage and as a part of the drug war and put into, I did 18 months, ended up in prison. First was a year, and then it took a couple times me getting out and going back and forth and probation and parole and all this stuff till, I finally had to go inside myself and learn about that. But what I realized though through that journey, which led to my personal awakening, both in the activist realm and starting to get involved and read Ron Paul and read about all these crazy conspiracies and just learn all this stuff, all of that began with getting locked up. And even before then, it was just, I didn't know how to deal with my personal shit. I didn't know, I had no effective means to do it. The only thing that ever really kind of helped me feel like I had some sense of therapy was psychedelics. The first time I ever took acid or took mushrooms was like the first time I could step outside of myself and get this like, whoa, like I've been doing some crazy shit and I have a lot of stuff to deal with. But it was, at the time, getting high and using drugs was just in my environment, and that was the best way that I knew how to cope. And it took me getting locked up and discovering meditation, and also just looking around my environment and having family who spent my entire life in prison and having to have this whole gut check. It's like, wow, is this direction? I literally felt like I could see I can keep going this way or I can try something new. I've been dealing with drugs and homelessness and all this crazy shit at the time, and it was like, let's see what can happen this way. And so I just started really just taking notes every day, just thinking and processing. And as I got more sober and the clouds started to lift, I felt like I rediscovered myself. And through all that experience, I started to do research on the drug war. And that was really the first thing that kind of, when I got out, I lived next to a library, and I started researching a lot and started realizing that I love to learn, I love to write. I just didn't appreciate the way they were trying to jam it down my throat. And for most of my life, the world didn't make any fucking sense. So getting high and doing all this crazy stuff, like looking at the world with this false authority that on some level I feel like I've probably always been an anarchist. I never really understood it as a philosophy, but I definitely understood that in high school that having an adult talk down to me and treat me like, I was nothing just because they were an adult was insane. I immediately felt like this is wrong. So I had this personal journey, and it started with that drug addiction and getting locked up, and through that process discovering a lot about the world and really looking at all the deception that exists in our world. And that eventually led me to the point about recognizing that the state as an institution itself is immoral and is illegitimate. And like I said, starting to look into libertarianism and anarchy, and then discovering Kankin and seeing that, wait, there is a solution. We take in so much information, especially myself and John. We both also write for several websites and do journalism and citizen journalism and activism, and so we're constantly down in this information. And my goal with that is just to propagate the message, to show people these are all the crimes the government's doing, these are the reasons you should let go of this false institution. But when you get bogged down in that, it's often easy for activists. I talk to activists on a daily basis, and I'd probably say at least half of them think that there's no solutions and think that it's hopeless, that everything going on in the world is just the way it's going to be, and shit's gonna hit the fan and we're all gonna kill each other or something crazy like that. But to me, I see a different way, and I see that if we take the time to start working on ourselves and facing those difficult issues, and in the book we try to give various ideas from just having a good friend to talk to, meditation, flotation tanks, yoga. There's a whole range of ways that we can learn to heal and start digging through those traumas. And I know that might sound odd to connect something like meditation or spirituality to a concept like anarchy and the idea of no government and self-governance and self-rule, but to us they really hit home. There's a quote that's in there from anthropologist Michael Harner, and he calls shamanism the aboriginal roots of religion. It predates religion, and that this is something that us as human beings, as free people in the world, that we look to the stars and we look to nature to interpret the world, and we came up with our own ways and our own means to do that. Now, of course, if your spirituality involves aggressing upon other people, then that's not what we're advocating for. But to us, it's like, I don't really care if you pray to the Christian God or to the flying spaghetti monster, or you have no God at all, as long as we can get along and we can find a way to focus on common ground. And that's where my last point is, focusing on common ground. We're not only trying to bring these areas of, because I feel like both of us had the experience of having friends who are into researching consciousness and spirituality and meditation and yoga and stuff, but they don't want to. Some of that mindset is like, well, we don't want to talk about the bad stuff because then we're going to manifest it or we're going to create it. So they don't want to hear about the philosophy. They don't want to hear about the politics and all the shit that's going on with the state. And then you got over here, we got our friends who are anarchist, libertarian leaning, but they don't care what our spiritual beliefs are, or they're just strictly rational, reductionist mindset, and they're not willing to look even into some of the concepts. So what we're trying to do is bridge that gap. and find common ground between these seemingly different groups of people. And another way that I'm extremely focused on trying to find common ground is, again, and I don't want to assume that everybody here is an anarchist, but in general, this message is about common ground no matter what you identify as. If you're out here for this place, I imagine you're a pretty free-thinking individual, whether you call yourself an anarchist or not. So I feel like we're already allies because you're out here. But what I want to do is to find ways to bridge this divide between left and right, Democrat, Republican, left anarchists and right anarchists, and all this division that is just propagated through the internet and through culture. It's just, and again, to me, it comes back to being humble enough and letting go of that ego, whether or not you know that your message is strong and could probably lead to more happiness for people if they would only just believe and put it into action. Because that's the thing, is agorism is anarchy in action. It's not sitting around discussing the philosophy all day. It's literally creating the steps towards the new world. It's a strategy to exit the matrix. And so the same way we believe in that, we recognize that we have allies that are all around here. There are plenty of people who recognize that the government is a problem. And they may, consider themselves to be on the left of the political spectrum, but there's still so much common ground. And if we only focus on these certain issues, that without a doubt the media and those who own the media and who own the government use these issues to divide us as a people. I mean, I don't think I've seen the country more divided in my lifetime. I'm only 30 years old, but in the past year, I feel like there's been so many things that anytime the media is talking about it, these media companies are owned by the same people, so if they're all talking about it, they're talking about it for a reason. So there's just so much division that's being put out there, and I think it's important for us to remember that we have to find common ground and not box ourselves up. I come to these type of conferences and libertarian-minded events because I want to spread this idea. I don't want to have the circle jerk, the talking in circles. I want us to reach new people. We have to get outside of our own circles, and I feel like this book helps reach a new crowd that might not have considered anarchist philosophy, but also going further than that, I want to throw tribute to two older anarchist thinkers who are no longer with us, but I really hope that everybody will do more research on them, and some may be familiar with Karl Hess, and like I said, Konkin. Konkin, of course, discovered or discussed the strategy of agorism, wrote the New Libertarian Manifesto and the Agorist Primer, which I recommend both of them. You can find them online all over the place. And Karl Hess, who was an amazing person who, to me, there's some good documentaries on him you can find on YouTube, but basically this guy started out writing political speeches for Barry Goldwater, so he came from the political mainstream and went through that, and then he was with the Rothbardians and the New Right, and then he also joined up with the New Left and the Old Right with the New Left during the anti-war movement of the 60s, and he was really trying to bridge these gaps. He was one of the first people within this libertarian movement to try to say, like, why don't we work with these hippies who are against the war? We have a lot of common ground. And so they also launched a journal called Left and Right Libertarian Journal, which was just about that, focusing on the common ground between these different movements and different ideologies that, for the most part, I mean, they already see the same problem that we see. They might not see the same solution, but and eventually we probably will have to come to terms with that. I mean, the idea of if we were able to get past the state in a peaceful, agorist way and build this new counter economy and get off of this Federal Reserve note and all their institutions, maybe eventually these other type of anarchists or radical thinkers might be like, hey, well, now we're ready to get rid of you capitalists or anarchical capitalists or agorists or whatever they think. And at that point we would deal with that. But up until then, I feel like we're wasting opportunities, because I don't know if anybody's looking around, but it seems like the world's going like pretty fucking crazy very fast, and I personally would like to create a more free world in my lifetime. I know that some say, well, we can't do it in our lifetime, but we can hope towards the next 2 generations of kids. And we see all these beautiful children here that are running around getting a taste of freedom. They're just experiencing life as they should. And that's what we're all after. And I think that we can do this, but it's going to take us letting go of our ego. It's going to take us working on our own personal healing that we have to do. And it's going to take a little bit of brushing up on what others in the past have tried and trying to find common ground between all these communities. So that's what I got to say. If you want to read more about our ideas, they're in this book, and we'll be over there. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Eric.